Boker Tov, Shavua Tov. Today's daf is daf Mem Vav. And now we are into the whole process of Egla Rufa. And the Zkanim have already said whatever they had to say about Kohanim Omrim, and the response of the Kohanim after the Zkanim cleaned their hands of any responsibility in causing the death of this slain person. The Kohanim respond, Kaper li'amcha Yisrael asher padis Hashem. V'al titein dam noki b'kerev amcha Yisrael. So this is a prayer that the Kohanim recite. It has to be in Lashon Kodesh. And the question is whether, the dinim of kahuna as far as avodas hakorban and those requirements will apply here as well. For example, in Minchas Chinuch waivers as to whether or not a kohen balmum would be kosher for this kriya. He assumes for sure cholol would be possible because he doesn't have kedushas kahuna, but the psul of a balmum, because the Egla Rufa itself, as we'll see, could be a balas mum. So perhaps the kohen could be a bal mum. So he's not kosher for the avoda, but the arifa is not an avoda, so therefore the kohen could recite this even though he's a bal mum. V'lo yitzrichim lomar v'nichaper lahem adam. There's no need for the kohen, and that's what the Mishnah is pointing out, to add anything about the kapara in its reality, meaning in its mamoshus, because the Torah itself has guaranteed us that this is a process of kapara. Ela ruach hakodesh mevasrasan. We have Ruach HaKodesh, meaning the words of the Torah are like Ruach HaKodesh, and they've already notified us through Moshe Rabbeinu that the dam will be mechaper through the Arifas HaEgla. Now the Marsha adds another note here, which I think we'll appreciate later on, not today. And that is that in a similar way to the bedika of drinking mei mararim in the case of a sotah, the Egla Rufa process will also be a kind of a bedika, and we'll be able to find and locate the rotzeach. And then we'll judge him, and he will be put to death, and that will be a kapara. The Gemara says the following: V'yehei mum posel be'egla mikal v'chomer. And the Gemara now wants to figure out why the Mishnah establishes that a mum is not a posel in Egla Rufa when there's a kal v'chomer from para aduma. Uma para she'ena shonim poslos ba. There's a kula in paraduma that doesn't have a parallel in Egla Rufa, and that is that a para could be older in age. But Egla, sheshonim poslos ba, with regard to Egla, the calf has to be 1 year old. The Chachamim actually hold that they could be 2 years old. But in any event, there is a psul after a year or two. So you see that the Torah is more machmir on the standards of an egla than it is on paraduma. So paraduma has a psul of mum, then how much more so in a dinshe mum poselpa in the case of egla rufa. And the Gemara says, Shani Chosam, the Omar Kro, there's a special miyud in the Pasuk in Paraduma, Asherein Ba Mum. And the word Ba is a miyud, Mum ba mum posel, the ein mum posel be'egla rufa. And the entire sugi that we're going to learn now revolves around this question about whether or not we can consistently use the word ba as a mute, because the Gemara raises the following question. We find the word ba in the Parsha of Egla Rufa as well. And the Torah describes the Egla in Dvarim Chafalf as Asher lo ubad ba. Elameyat asks the Gemara, lo yu shar avodas poslos ba. In Paraduma, we know that ol, which is literally translated into English as a yoke, hassles the para to be a paraduma. But the Torah never explicitly states that avoda is also a posel in paraduma. And lichora, the way we would derive the psul of avoda and paraduma would be to derive from egla rufa. Because in egla rufa, it says asher lo ubad ba, but the extra word ba is going to be, if we'll be consistent about it, will be a mute to teach me that avoda is a posel in egla rufa, but not elsewhere, meaning not in paraduma. Lama Omer Rabbi Yehuda Marav, hiniach aleh uda shel sakim psula. Now, what this means is that you have a para, and you place the burden onto the para, and that itself is an avoda. I mean, we're going to see later on, the Gemara is going to discuss why he put something on the back of a para. Was it for purposes of the para transporting the object from place to place, or was it for convenience? He didn't have a place to put it down. But either way, we see that avoda is a poseles with regard to paraduma. There's only one, and this we're going to derive from egla rufa. Although, truth be told, we're going to go even beyond the egla rufa. Be egla ad shetimshach. And in the parsha para of egla rufa, the Torah says eglas bakar asher lo ubad ba, and then the Torah adds 3 words. Asher lo mashach aleha. I don't have the time now. We're in a tremendous rush for today. It's an unbelievably long daf. But so if you open up a chumash, if you could do that for me, if you don't mind, Dvarim Chaf Aleph Parak Gimel, Pasuk Gimel, you'll see the Torah adds 3 words over there. So therefore, in the case of Egla Rufa, the calf is only disqualified if it relocates the burden that was placed on its back. And we're going to see that in Paraduma, we're even more machmir, and just placing the burden on the back of the paraduma itself is a poselis. That avoda is a poselis. And the Gemara is going to ask a kind of dial of adin, that since we derive paraduma in this case from egla rufa, it shouldn't be more machmir than egla rufa. Okay, but that's for the future. So we see clearly that there's an inconsistency here. In the case of the word ba in the parsha of Egla Rufa, we're not going to derive it as a miyut to exclude paraduma. And yet the word ba with regard to mum in paraduma, where the Torah says asher ein ba mum, we use the ba as an exclusion, as a miyut, to exclude Egla Rufa. So there's an inconsistency here. So the Gemara answers, Shiny Para, the Alfinin ol me Egla. In the parsha of Egla Rufa, it says, Asher lo, oh, these are the words that I was looking for, Asher lo mashcha bi ol. But the word ol appears. And in Paraduma, likewise, it says, Asher lo ola oleha ol. And therefore, we derive in an open chain in both directions from Egla Rufa to Paraduma, from Paraduma to Egla Rufa. No, okay, fine. But that doesn't solve our problem because Egla nami teise ol mi para. Again, if the Gzer Shava ol goes in two directions, and you can derive the psul of avoda in Paraduma from Egla Rufa, then you should derive the psul of mum from Paraduma to Egla Rufa. And the Gemara answers Hamiyut Rachman Abba. So the Gemara asks immediately Be'egla Nami Ksiv Ba. So again, there's an inconsistency here. So the Gemara is going to answer that although the Ba in the Parsha Paraduma is totally superfluous, and therefore we could use it as a miyut to exclude a psul of mum in Egla Rufa, but nevertheless the word Ba in the Parsha of Egla Rufa is necessary to teach me a different din, a different miyut, and therefore the word Ba would not exclude the psul of avoda in Paraduma. If you have a behemas kachim, should we derive from Egla Rufa that if there was work done with this behemas kachim, again, we're not sure if it was done before he was magdish behema or afterwards, that's going to come up in the sugya, then we would think that the behema and the kodesh is possible and derive it from Egla Rufa. No, the Torah adds the word ba to exclude the psul of avoda with regard to kachim, but I still include the psul of avoda in Paraduma because the Gzeres Shava ol. So now the Gemara asks, what was the Hamamim to say that avoda would be a poseles in Karbanos? Salka dait kamina leisi kavachom me'egla. Uma egla she'ein mum posel ba avoda poseles ba kodshim she'mum poseles bahem eino din shavoda poseles bahem. So we see that the Torah is mekil in Egla Rufa. A mum is not a posel like it is in kodshim, and yet avoda is a poseles. Therefore, how much more so in kodshim where mum is a posel? The Torah was more machmer in kodshim than it was in Egla Rufa. Then the chumrah of the psul avoda should certainly apply to kodshim. Equal and mifrach, the Gemara says is a pircha na kavachomer mala egla shekain shonim poseles ba. The Torah is more machmir in Egla Rufa. Therefore, you can't derive avoda as a psul to kodshim. Where's the Torah more machmir in Egla Rufa than is in kodshim? That is a psul of shonim. Now, the truth is there is a psul of shonim in kodshim, but only in two occasions. That's korban pesach and a korban chatos. Both of those korbanos have to be from a newborn that's up to 1 year old. And that's what the Gemara is going to object now. Otu kodshim ileka de pasli beishonim. There's a psul of shonim in kodshim. So if we look at kodshim as a generic term, then included within kodshim we have a psul of shonim in those two cases. And if that be the case, then we could go back and resurrect our Kal V'chomer, and therefore the need for the exclusion of Ba with regard to the psul of avoda in kodshim. What I mean is Ba in the Parsha of Egla Rufa. So ki yitzdu kol lahani kodshim de pasel bu shonim. So the same chumrah that you have in Egla Rufa, you have in kodshim. namely that is a psul of shanim. So with regard to those kodshim that have psul of shanim, then certainly Egla Rufa is kal, because the psul of mum does not apply to Egla Rufa, and yet the Torah says that avodah is a poselis, how much more so in kodshim, and for that I need the word ba to exclude the psul of avodah in kodshim. But with regard again to paraduma, which has exerishov of ol, I will establish that just like in Egla Rufa there's a psul of avodah, so too in paraduma there's a psul of avodah, not just the psul of ol. So the Gemara asks kodshim, v'kodshim de lo poslu bu avodah me'ochen nafka. You need the word ba in Egla Rufa to be machshir kodshim that were behemoth that was subject to avodah me'hosam nafka. I have a pasuk in Vayikra Chav Beis, averes o shavul o charutz o yabelos o gerev o yalefes lo sakrivu elo Hashem. Look at the extra word ela. This is a whole list of mumim that pasal behema for kodshim, for mizbeach, but ela iyatomakriv al tomakriv kodshim shenever bo hen avoda. The extra word ela is coming to teach me that there's no psul of avoda in kodshim. So why do you need the word ba in the parsha of Egla Rufa to teach me that in kodshim there's no psul of avoda? And where says Itzrach, we need two psukim to be machshir avoda in kodshim. Salkadait kaminani milihechad yovid b'hem avoda. Avodas heter. Avodas isur. Let's say, for example, on Shabbos, he would do avoda and violate the isur of avoda b'melacha melechas behem on Shabbos. Or, for example, if he does charisha with shar v'chamar yachdav in kelayim, his lema litzeri, maybe here the Torah would be machmer and say, well, you use the behema for an avoda asura. That avoda asura is going to generate a psul in the carbon. Sricha, therefore I need an extra limit of ba. Even with regard to avodas isur, we have a derivation that it doesn't passel the carbon. Mehachanafka. And the pasuk says in the same chapter in Vayikra Chav Beis, a little bit further, it says, "Umiyad ben necher lo sakrivu es lechem elokechem mikol ela." Again, the extra word ela, to teach me that the parsha of Bali Mumim is a psul in carbon, iatom makriv, afal atom makriv kodshim shenever hem avoda. And therefore, I have two different psukim to be machshir kodshim shenevta b'avodah. I need both of them. I need one for avodas heter and another for avodas isur. But I don't need the word ba. I don't need an extra miud in the parsha of Egla Rufa to be machshir avodah in kodshim. I already have two psukim to be machshir avodah in kodshim, two extra words of ela in the parsha of Mum. Gemara says Itzter. I need a third miut to be machshir avodah in kodshim. Salkadait kaminahani mili. When do we say that avodah is not a poselis in kodshim? That's echad the ovid b'hem chulin. All right, the animal is chulin and it did avodah. Now you can be magdish it. Ovid b'hem kodshim. Now you already magdish it. Now you do avodah after you are magdish it. Ema. I might think litzaru the behema. I don't know why the Gemara used the word litzaru. I would say lifsalu, but okay, the Gemara chooses litzaru. Tzricha. I need the extra ba in the parsha of Egla Rufa to establish that even an avoda in this behema after it was already sanctified does not passel the carbon. You'll bring it on the mizbeah. And the mela, once I need the word ba as a miut for avoda in kodshim, then I can no longer use it as a miut for paraduma. So paraduma is now going to be passel with avoda, which means not just anochas all, but even avoda. Right, the pasuk in Egla Rufa says Asher lo moshcha. So Gemara raises the following objection to Rav, because Rav is assuming that a para becomes psula for para aduma through masa, even if the animal was not pulled and did not transport the masa, the burden on its back. Meisvei, the pasuk says in the parasha para aduma, Asher lo ol. So the Bryce asks, Ainli ela ol shara avodas minayin amid kal v'chomer uma egla, meaning egla rufa. The Torah was mekil and ein mum posel ba, and yet shara avodas posels ba is para shemum posel ba, and it didn't shara avodas posel ba. V'im nafshecha lomar. And if you want to offer and suggest a pirch on this kal v'chomer, and then you reject the kal v'chomer, which we'll see in a second what that pircha is. Then nomer kana ol v'nemelal and ol. We have ol in paradum, we have ol in egla rufa, and that sets up exeris shava malahal and shar avodas posels ba afkan shar avodas posels ba. Not just ol, but even shar avodas, and that we're going to derive from paradum, from egla rufa, because in egla rufa it says ashalo ubad ba. Mayim nafshchaloma. What was that pircha that the Brisa intimated? We know that in Egla Rufa there's a psul of shanim, so the Torah was more machmir in Egla Rufa. In Paraduma there's no psul of shanim. So now you're telling me that you want to derive a kal v'chomer from Egla Arufa to Para. On the contrary, Pugfaket, as we say in Yiddish, Egla Arufa has a chomer that doesn't exist and has no parallel in Para Duma. Inami, now the Gemara offers an alternative, an additional pircha to this kal v'chomer. Kodshim yochichu shemum posel b'hem. V'ena avoda poselas b'hem. So how can you derive from a kal v'chomer that avoda should be a poselas in paraduma? You see that the Torah was makil in kodshim, and avoda is not a poselas, and therefore I have no choice but to use the gzeres shav and emerkan ol and emerkan lal and ol. We have two ols, one in the parasha of Egla Rufa and one in the parasha paraduma malahal and sharavodos afkan sharavodos. So now the Gemara is going to ask the dayol of Lamanadin question that we intimated before, but in a different language. Mimakom shebasa. Mimakom shebasa. You're deriving a psul of avoda in paraduma from Egla Rufa. Well, wait a minute. Malahalon, the Torah says explicitly with regard to the psul avoda in Egla Rufa, it says ad shetimshal, that it's not enough that you laid a burden down on the top of the Egla and that it disqualifies the calf for Egla Rufa. No, you've got to be Moshe. You've got to make sure that the animal did a full-fledged avoda by pulling and transporting the burden on top of its back. Is afkan, so too in Parah shetimshal. Why do you tell me, Rav, that if you placed a burden, what was his language? What was it called? Whatever it was over there. Anyway, he put the stuff on the back of the parah, and that passes the parah. Why is that so? I mean, you need Mashiach. I mean, if you're deriving it from Egla Rufa, then Dayalavam and Adilios Kinadun. Oh, yeah, it's called Uda Shel Sakin. Okay. So the Gemara says Tanoihi. This din of Rav really depends on a machlokes Tanoi. The Ika de Maisile me Egla, the Ika de Maisila me Gufa de Par. Enachinami. If you hold like that Tana, that you derive the din of Shara Vodos as a psul in Para from Egla Rufa, then you're right. Then Masa itself would not passel the Para. You need Mashicha. But we have another Tana who derives the psul of Avoda from Paradum itself, locally in the Parsha Paraduma, and you don't have to come on to a derivation for Egla for the Sanya. It says in the pasuk regarding to Para, Asher lo Allah leha ol, ein li ela ol, shar avodas minayin, tamalom asher lo Allah aleha ol. The pasuk could have been written in a different way. It could have said, Asher lo ol ola aleha. And that would have excluded anything but ol. But since it says Asher lo ola, and then ol at the end of the pasuk, we assume that Asher lo ola means mikol makol. And that includes Shar Avodos. No, im kain matal v'lo ol. It's very interesting. You have a klal and then a prat. I mean, you're saying Asher lo ola includes all avodos, and then it says ol. So the Torah explicitly is limiting it exclusively to all. And the Brisa answers, no. All posel bein b'shas avoda, bein shelo b'shas avoda. Shar avodos einam posos el b'shas avoda. So it means the following. If you put an ol, which I think in English is translated as a yoke, on top of the para, and your purpose is for the para to do harisha in your field, so then the ol placed on the animal's back, or neck, I should say, I guess, is the beginning of the process of avodah. But now the Torah adds another category of ol. That ol is an absolute automatic posel in para. Even if, let's say, he has no place to put down the ol, whatever, he puts it on top of a para. He has no intention to work with this para at this particular time. So there's not going to be any mashicha. There's a separate psul of ol. But Shar Avodos, they passel the para only if he puts the ol down on the neck of the para for the purpose of a certain avodah. He's not just putting it down there on a temporary basis because, he has no place to put it right now. Because in that latter case, it would not passel. In any event, this Tana does not derive the din of Shar Avodos Postos Paraduma from Egla Rufa, but rather derives it from Paradum itself. As we saw, there was a klal and then a prat, but the klal indicated that all avodos will disqualify the Paraduma. So Rav, who says that even when he puts an Uda Shel Sakin on top of the para, and even though he didn't do a Mashicha, which again, therefore, in Egla Rufa would not passel the Egla, but nevertheless, it passels the Paraduma immediately when he puts it down on top, B'toras Shar Avodos. And you don't ask the question, Dai Levam and Adin, because we're no longer relying on Egla Rufa, which has the exclusivity of Asher Moshach, of Moshchapa, but rather we're deriving it from the Pasuk Asher Lo Allah Aleha in the local parsha of Paradum. So the Gemara asks, wait a second. You're deriving Shar Avodos Postos B'Paraduma from Asher Lo Allah Aleha Ol V'Ema Asher Lo Aleha Kla. Ol prat. Klalu prat ein beklala masha befrat. Unless there's an extra klal at the end, and we only have a klal and a prat, which the Gemara right now assumes we only have a klal and a prat, then the Torah is telling you that the klal only applies when it's ke'ena prat. All in midachrini lo. See, I'm a little bit confused here because what do you mean midachrini lo? So why did the Torah give you the klal? What is the? I guess what the Gemara is saying is that when the Torah seems to indicate a general rule, but then it specifies it, then the klal only applies in that prat, and that's all, but not to shar avodos. And the Gemara answers, no, we have a klal at the end. Why? Asher ribuyahu. The word asher is an extra word, and it gives me a klal after the prat, which allows me to expand the klal to go beyond the limitation of ol and to include shar avodos. And once it includes shar avodos, it can apply at the very beginning of the avodah when you place the ud shel sakin on top of the parah, even though it hasn't yet moved an inch. V'tanyanami gabi egla ki hay gavna. Now we have a drasha in the parasha of Egla Arufa that's very similar. The Torah says, with regard to Egla Arufa, asher lo moshcha ol ve'ol ein li ela ol shar avodos minayin tam lo asher lo ubad ba mikol makom. So the Torah says a klal of all avodos. In keimat hamalom ol posel bein b'shas avoda bein b'shalo b'shas avoda. So if he puts on the ol simply for the purpose of on just a momentary, temporary basis to put down the ol there, that's all. He's not interested in an avoda. It passes the egla. But shar avoda same posel b'shas avoda. But if he puts down a masa on top of the egla of this calf, it doesn't disqualify the calf. The ema shelo uba ba klal the old prat klal prat ema klal mashma prat. That means all in midiachrini lo asher ribuyehu. Om Rabbi Avo boy mi name Rabbi Yochanan meshichas ol bekama. How much of a meshicha qualifies as a meshicha to disqualify the egla? Omalekim lo ol. The size of the ol. Now the ol has a width and it has a thickness to it. The Gemara says suffixly arko ola rachba. Okay, let me just take a minute and we'll get the footnote here. He says the following. The length of a yoke, that's called an arco, means the size of the yoke from end to end, right? So we call it the width, but the Gemara calls it the length, right? So the yoke moves out, the parts of the yoke that move out, and that's called the orech. The width, the rochav, refers to its size from front to back. Front to back, i.e. its thickness. I need one, I need a Pirush Chai here, one of those diagrams. So the Gemara says, Amaluhu ahura bon Rabbi Yaakov Shmei lididim fashlei mida de Rabbi Yochanan meshichas ol rachbo tefach. So we said that rochbo, the width refers to its size from front to back, which is only a tefach. So again, the width, right? If let's say my head is the head of the calf, and you put a yoke on my neck, so this is called the orech. But if you would start from here and go to the back, it's just the tefach, and that's called the rochav. So that's Mashichas ol l'rochbo. So the Gemara asks for lema tefach, hakamash malon shiur di ol tefach havu. My nafkamina. Why do I have to know that an ol is a tefach in width? And the answer is lemekach umemkar. So it means if I buy, we have an agreement, a contractual agreement, you're selling me an ol, it's got to be the width of a tefach. So even though he didn't specify the exact size, the seller must provide him with a yoke that is a tefach thick. He adds here a comment that Rabbi Yochanan was referring to the size of the standard yoke in his time. However, in different times, different places, the standard size of a yoke would be different, and that would have an impact on a sales agreement. Rabbi Yochanan ben Shaul, mipnei ma Amra Torah. This is a little bit of a quasi agadata, meaning it's darshin and time of the crow. What's this all about? Amra Torah heavy. Havei egla ba nachal. What's this thing about bringing the calf down to a valley? Amar Kodesh Baruch Yovel Davar Shelo Osa Peiros via Aref b'Makom she'ein Osa Peiros. Right, a calf presumably has not yet; it's not mature enough to have brought fruit into the world, meaning to give birth. And as a result of this murder, a person who was presumably capable of Piri Verivia is now dead. And we go down to the Nachal because a Nachal is a place which cannot produce fruit. And we'll see because the soil has to be hard and rocky. We didn't get up to that yet. Lasos peros, it should be an atonement for the act of murder, which prevented so my peros, you're telling me lema piri verivia? You're telling me that he could not produce children? Would you be mafkia the whole din of Hegla Rufa in the case of a corpse that was located and he was the victim of murder, and he's not capable of having children? Ella, but rather let's reinterpret the concept of Peros in a more metaphoric way. And Peros does not refer to Piri Verivia, but El to mitzvos. Every person could have and would have fulfilled mitzvos, but you killed him, and now he can't. Marina also Nachal Eson. What does Eson mean? Eson means it's tough. You can't plant anything. The ground is hard. Can you prove from Tanakh that the word Eson means tough or hard? Shenemar, and here we're going to quote a pasuk about Midbar Chav Dalid. Esan moshavecha v'sim basela kinecha.